On behalf of Westmoreland County Community College, I'm Dr. Kevin Copper, and I'm so excited to be here today for this edition in the series Westmoreland Wellness. What we've been doing this semester has been absolutely remarkable because we've been highlighting not only the issues that our community faces, but also the incredible people that we have here working in our community. And in fact, today, I'm super excited about having representatives of the Blackburn Center. Whenever it was much more snowy, and we were talking about this in December, and we were looking at the schedule, who should we invite to be part of the series? And the Blackburn Center has been at the top of that list. It was within the very first part of our conversations on this topic of who are the most important drivers for community and service in our midst, and this group came right out on top. So the first thing I want to do is have some individuals. We have some excellent students here. I have an individual in charge of student affairs. So I'm going to have those individuals introduce themselves quickly, and then we'll get to the guests of honor, and that's Cassie and Julie. So first, Rob, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the college?
Yes, so my internet isn't great today, so if I lose it again, I apologize. My name is Rob Villela. I'm the coordinator of student life at Westmoreland. We're the ones that handle a lot of the extracurricular related activities, clubs, honor societies, all that fun stuff. And we also oversee a committee called the Prevention and Awareness Committee that talks about some of the serious topics that we'll talk about today.
Thank you, Rob. And I can tell you that the best part about being a professor is the students. Hands down, it's by far the best part. So in this instance, I happen to have two really talented people who are with us today, both of whom are executive board members of our PTK chapter. So we'll start with you, Adrian.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I am the vice president of the Westmoreland Phi Theta Kappa chapter. Wow, that was really hard to say, guys. And I am majoring in psychology. This is my last semester at Westmoreland, and I will be transferring to Cal U next semester. Hopefully, someday I'll be a therapist. That's the plan right now, anyway.
Well, there's little question that you are destined for great things, and it's been just an honor to be able to work with you, as is the case with Danny. Danny, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. I'm Danny, by the way, and I'm the person who oversees the social media / I guess you could say secretary. And let's see, I'm recently a social work student, and I help with all the fun activities on campus.
Well, it's great, Danny, that you're going into a helping profession. We certainly need a lot of people like you. And beyond that, I have to thank you for all the great work you're doing with our social media. In fact, people often comment to me that they know what's happening because of the work that you're doing. Let's go with Julie next. Could you introduce yourself, Julie, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Julie Levan. I work with Blackburn Center, and I am the campus and systems advocate. So I go to different universities and hospitals and talk about domestic violence, sexual assault, and other crimes.
Well, thank you for being here, Julie, and obviously thank you for all that you do. And last but not least, we'll bring Cassie in.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Elson. I am the Community Education Coordinator at Blackburn Center. So I get to do a little bit of everything, which is what I love about my job. So I do a lot of education and speaking at again, some campuses, some community groups, and different businesses throughout Westmoreland County. So I'm really excited to be here. I actually was a student at Westmoreland County Community College many years ago. I actually don't even remember what the year was, but I have a soft spot for your campus and for your school. I had a great experience there. So I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, we always love to hear from former students, and it's possible that long ago, Cassie, I was here too. So
could be.
It could be. There was no beard at that time. Well,
that's why.
Right? So we have a series of questions for you folks today. But the first thing I just wanted to ask you about quickly is that prior to this starting, I got to talk to Julie and Cassie about the Walk a Mile series, about that event. And I told them that my family's been doing it, and I go with my wife and my sons, and whenever it's held in person and we're at St. Clair Park, it's just infectious, positive energy. And seeing the people work together and walk together and be there for something that's such a good cause. So could you tell us, I know that there's a name change, which is pretty exciting, but also just tell us about that and what's going to be happening this year.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. So our Walk a Mile in Her Shoes is now called Walk a Mile in His, Her, There Are Shoes. And I don't even think I got the order of those things right. So you'll hear people saying it differently. But we really have been working over the last couple of years to make sure that this signature event is very much more inclusive, gender inclusive. While we know that the majority of victims of domestic violence are women or girls, that, that's where the majority comes in, but it certainly can happen to anybody. So while the national event is still Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, we want to make sure that we are acknowledging the fact that anybody can be a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. So last year we had to cancel our Walk a Mile event because of COVID. Kind of started right before our event was supposed to take place. And this year we have kind of pivoted and have put it together as a virtual event. So we're really, really excited. We're hoping to have the biggest turnout ever because lots of people can participate from anywhere. Instead of, trying to gather people in Greensburg, people can participate from anywhere. So the event is April 7th through April 10th, which is coming up very quickly. And on our website, you can go to blackburncenter.org. Right on the first page there's where you can click to go register. We also have a lot of virtual activities set up for kids and for adults. A lot of educational pieces on the Walk a Mile website, places where you can donate or you can create a team to do the walk. And then you can walk a mile at a location of your choosing during those days. And what we're asking for people to do is take pictures of their own walks and hashtag Walk Blackburn. And we're going to be putting together as much as we can on social media. I see Julie, thank you, just put the link for registration in the chat. We would love to have you join us. There is no fee to register this year. There are options to buy a t-shirt or buy a yard sign if you want to. Additionally, I want to point out that on the registration site, there is a list of locations that we suggest as just ideas of places where you can do your walk. And at a few of those locations, we'll have signage, big signage to do selfies with, things like that. So we're trying to make it as interactive as possible while still remaining safe and making sure that people are not gathering in large groups so that we're, keeping our community safe as well.
I know that we will likely be up at Wolf Rocks or somewhere where the nature is beautiful. And I've kept all of my t-shirts. So I quite literally could have a medley of t-shirts that I wear throughout the walk. So maybe my pictures will have a little bit of each t-shirt that I've had over the years.
I love that.
It's true. It's totally true. So could you tell us, what is the mission of the Blackburn Center?
Our mission is to end gender-based violence and other forms of violence. So that's our very broad mission. It sounds like a lot, something that maybe isn't achievable, but we believe that it is. So we want to end gender-based violence in our community. And to do that, we believe that a part of our mission is to address the root causes of violence. Instead of being reactionary to violence only, we want to really practice prevention and teach preventive methods so that we can get to violence at the root and stop it before it starts. So at Blackburn Center, we believe that everybody has a right to live free from violence, to be safe in their communities. And our mission is to make that happen.
Well, that's a powerful and much needed mission.
Cassie, what
sorry,
are
go ahead.
That's okay. What are the root causes of gender-based violence? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, great question. So there are obviously numerous causes or root causes, I should say, of violence. And a lot of them are things that we see every day, such as inequality, particularly among genders. You know, as much as a lot of things have changed over the years and we're seeing more equality in some places, and more opportunities that are equal for everybody, it's still not anywhere near across the board or where it needs to be. And so that inequality can really be one of the causes of violence, because anytime that there's a power differential or somebody who believes that they are better than any other group of people, it's more likely that violence will happen. Another root cause is the objectification and the degradation of women in our media, which most of us, I would probably say, are almost immune to. You know, if you really think about it, you might be like, oh yeah, we do see that women are really objectified a lot of the time, but we are so inundated with that type of media that sometimes we don't even notice that it's happening or notice the effects that it's having. But as long as women are objectified and degraded in media, then they will be seen as targets for those who want to victimize them. Kind of going along with that, another root cause is rape culture, which is kind of a buzzword or a buzz term that we use in our field of violence prevention. But what it really encompasses is the societal norms that say that rape is just something that's going to happen, that domestic violence is inevitable. And so it also includes victim blaming, which we've learned about a lot more over the past several years. We've seen it a lot more in the news and things like that. But in order to really get to the root of violence, especially gender-based violence, we have to stop blaming victims. We have to stop saying as a society that this type of violence is something that's going to happen no matter what. And those are the things at Blackburn Center that we really want to educate our community on, and saying, you know, we don't have to wait until violence happens to address it. Let's address it before it happens. Let's address these things and these thought processes and these belief systems that are faulty and that put people at risk for violence. So those are the main things that I like to point out as root causes of violence. There are certainly many more, but I think a lot of them, even the ones that we're not, you know, that I'm not talking about specifically right now, really stem from those things. So other root causes stem from inequality. They stem from harmful gender norms. They stem from rape culture. They stem from the media and what we see in the media about women in particular. And so it's important to be really aware of those things in our everyday lives in order to really address violence in our communities.
Thank you. I think you're right.
Yeah,
You're hard pressed to not see that inequality on the news everywhere. As soon as you turn on the media and, you know, social media, it's everywhere. So I think it's very true.
Yeah, so I know you guys have been talking about gender-based violence, but what other services does the Blackburn Center provide or offer?
Yeah, again, great question. We really try to encompass anybody in our community who's been a victim of violence who may need us. So our services, our services include a 24-hour hotline. That's definitely our most used service. Our hotline is available 24/7. It's always answered by a trained crisis counselor. And it is for anybody who has experienced violence or somebody who may be supporting somebody who's experienced violence, but also for people in the community who might have questions about what we do, or questions about the prevalence of violence in our communities, or questions about our services. We really just want to be a resource for Westmoreland County in particular. But anybody can call us, and if Westmoreland County is not their area where they live or where they need services, we can point them in the right direction. Julie put our 24/7 hotline number in the chat. I really encourage you all to write that number down, have it available for people who you know who may need it. Again, it's not limited to victims or survivors of violence. It's really for anybody that we can help or give information to, or, you know, just somebody who might need to talk and really try to process something that's happened to them that they're not sure how they feel about it or what to do next. So that's definitely I would say our most used service. We also have shelter for victims of domestic violence and their dependent children. Our shelter is in a confidential location so that the victims and survivors can feel safe. And while they're at shelter, they can get some help that they need to find jobs, find housing, and to get back on their feet or to get started on their own for the very first time. We provide legal and medical services. So we have advocates who go to the courthouse and are available for victims of violence who need a protection from abuse order or who need civil legal services related to the abuse that they've experienced. And similarly, we have medical advocates who will go to all of the local emergency rooms to meet victims who go to report some type of abuse that happened to them, or just when a medical professional notices that somebody in the emergency room may have been the victim of some type of violence, they call us so that we can go and to support those people if they want us there with them, which we find that a lot of times they do. Once we're there, they usually like having somebody there to be on their side. We, of course, provide therapy and counseling services for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. We have many different levels of counseling and therapy for really anybody who's experienced something like that, who needs it, families, men, women, children. We try to work with anybody who needs the help to find the person who would be right for them to talk to. And of course, we have these wonderful educational programs where we get to go into the community and do trainings and presentations about many, many, many different topics. We really want to meet our community partners where they are and give them the information that they need. And so we work really hard to really tailor our presentations and our information for whoever is asking us to present and touch on whatever it is that they are trying to get across. And maybe one of the most important things to point out about our services is that they are free of charge to our clients. Nobody will ever pay for any of our services. And they can be anonymous. Our counseling services are very confidential. So, excuse me, we really encourage victims and survivors to reach out, even if they're unsure if they want to go through with receiving services, because at least they can remain anonymous, have their information taken confidentially, and not pay anything to get a little bit of support where they need it.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Well, those are incredible services. And I mean this honestly whenever I say that you folks are the angels among us for helping people like you do. And I quite honestly put a challenge out there to anyone watching or listening. Please tell 5 people to tell 5 people that hotline number. Tell 5 people to tell 5 people. Let's get as many people to have that number saved in their phone in the event that something happens to them or something happens to someone that they know. So tell 5 people to tell 5 people. Let's get that number to as many people as possible in the event that they face a crisis. I know that our country and the world has undergone a crisis in 2020. It's a year that won't be forgotten by any of us and definitely won't be forgotten by historians. And I think that one of the negative things that's happened as a result of the pandemic has been an increase in violence. Could you talk a little bit about how the pandemic and lockdowns and just the uncertainty that we've had over the last year has impacted violence?
Yeah, definitely. We've heard in general over the last year, a lot of news reports, a lot of different information about the impact of the pandemic on particularly those who are living in a domestic violence situation at home. And I think we don't have specific numbers that are reliable. There's a lot of different reports that will give you different statistics about the rise in violence over the last year. It is very safe to say that there are certainly more people, and again, particularly women and children, who became trapped at home with their abusers because of shelter-in-place orders and working from home and things like that. Our hotline remained steady as always. Our shelter remained full. And so what I have been really trying to present when we're talking about COVID and talking about the pandemic and domestic violence is that it really shed a light on domestic violence in our country, but domestic violence has always been a severe and widespread problem. We don't want to get too focused in on the stats around COVID in particular, because We don't want to lose that focus when people are going back to work, when they're going back to school. Domestic violence is still an issue. There are still just as many people who are experiencing it. It just might be not every single day in the way that it was during the pandemic. So it's very true that there was there was an increase in people who really didn't have any reprieve from their abusive partners during COVID because they were stuck at home with them. And a lot of people who were not able to call the hotline because they didn't have a chance to get to a phone and be by themselves to make that call. And therefore they couldn't ask for shelter. They couldn't ask for services that they might have needed. And right now we don't know how much of an impact that had because again, they weren't able to call. So it definitely was a very scary thing. And I think another thing that's really important to note is that we saw a lot of trends popping up, especially on social media, with ways to help somebody who might be stuck in a domestic violence situation. For example, maybe drawing something on their hand to hold up during a Zoom meeting to say, you know, I need help. While those things are done with the best of intentions, they are very dangerous because predators and abusers are also on Zoom meetings. They're also on social media. There's always a chance that that type of cry for help could backfire and really cause more damage to the victim. So we want to make sure to be putting the information out there to say, if you are worried about somebody, if you think somebody might be stuck at home and not able to call the hotline or to call a crisis center in their area, call us. Let us give you some tools to help them or to get some information that might be helpful to you in order to support them better. It's really important for all of us to understand that we need to reach out to professionals and people who have the correct resources to help victims and survivors of domestic violence during a pandemic, because even the most well-intended social media trends to help victims can be really, really dangerous for them if the person that their partner who's abusing them is at home and sees that happening. So we really have tried to use this pandemic as a platform to say, this is what we're here for. Call us, you can always Google a national hotline or a hotline in your area, but it's important to get the correct resources to be able to safely help victims of violence during this time.
Thank you.
Cassie, now that you brought that up, say I have a loved one or a friend and I think something might be going on with them. What are some of the signs that someone might be a victim of abuse?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that can be a really scary thing if you know somebody who you're worried about or you think might be experiencing abuse from a partner. And sometimes it can be really easy to tell, and sometimes you just aren't sure. One of the things that I think we see maybe the most often when we're working with victims and survivors is that they really have become isolated from their friends and family. Most people who abuse their partners want to have total control over that person. And so usually slowly over a period of time, they start to limit their contact with their friends and family so that they don't have those resources to reach out to. They really lose those connections. And what that does is it makes somebody who's being abused completely dependent emotionally on their partner who's abusing them. So if you notice a friend or family member who is, not reaching out as often or is not responding when you reach out to them, that can be a red flag. Also, of course, if you are seeing them or talking to them and they are, it seems like maybe they don't have control over their own schedule or over their money, or they're worried about their partner's reaction to what they're doing during the day, who they're with, how much they're spending, is another red flag for sure. I would say those are the main things that might be obvious right off the bat to somebody who cares about them. Of course, there can be physical signs. If there's physical violence involved, you might notice bruises or cuts or scrapes or things like that. But often people who abuse are pretty careful to make sure that is not a visible thing, whether that's by keeping the person they're abusing at home so they can't see anybody, or by causing physical harm in a way that's not visible to anybody else. So those are definitely the things to look out for. again, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but if you see any of those red flags, or even if you're not sure, even if the flag isn't red yet, but it's there, call us, call Blackburn Center, call somebody who can talk you through it. And that way too, you find the support that you need, because people who support people who are being abused also need support. They need resources. So I think those are the most important things to remember.
And I wanted to throw in one more thing.
Absolutely.
When you think about someone being in a relationship with someone else, people who use these abusive behaviors can oftentimes seem very charming to the outside world. So, you might go over to a friend's house, you might suspect, things are a little off because maybe you haven't seen them in however many months. And then, the abusive person might be very charming, but maybe you notice that they're not leaving the room. They're not letting you have any privacy with your friend, or like, Cassie had mentioned some of the other things that come up. But I think that's so important to know, is like, it's not like these monster people who are freaking out on everyone all the time. A lot of the times they do come off as like a very charming person, a very kind and loving, significant other or family member.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. That is so important to realize, that people who abuse others look exactly the same as people who don't abuse anybody. And that's a common misperception, I think, again, a lot of times perpetuated by the media, of this kind of monster in the closet persona, that's not, they're people who are abused are ordinary people who, like Julie said, can be very charming. That's part of how they maintain their control over their partner, is by seeming like a great person. So yeah, thank you, Julie. That's a good point that I didn't touch on.
Thank you. Those are some really good points that you brought up that I might not have actually thought of, so.
We're always learning something new too, with every client we work with anything that happens and that ends up in the media, there's always things that we're pulling out and learning to look for differently, or to address differently. So it's definitely a learning process for all of us.
So I know you talked about, I guess, resources, but what are ways we can help prevent violence?
Great. And I love that question, because I think that's one of the most important things that a lot of people don't think about too often, because we're all very focused a lot of the time on helping people who have been victimized, and that's good. We need to help those people. But as I said at the beginning, we can prevent this violence from happening to begin with, and that's really important too. So one of the best ways to prevent violence is to talk about it. All of you are here today to talk about it, and that's a great start. That's a prevention method right there, is just learning and being educated so that you can take this information and pass it on, or use it in a situation in your life that might help somebody. So what we find, of course, is that domestic violence and sexual assault, other types of violence, are really hard to talk about. It can be really uncomfortable. And that's all the more reason we need to talk about it anyway. And so if you feel uncomfortable talking about it, but you know that somebody in your life needs to hear it, you can reach out to somebody to help you have that conversation. At Blackburn Center, we provide education programs as early as preschool and kindergarten. Obviously, we're not talking to those young kids about domestic violence yet, but what we do talk about is empathy, expressing your feelings, and being able to express feelings without using any type of physical harm or harm at all to anybody else. And so I think that's one of the most important forms of prevention, that we need to start early, but as adults also, we need to focus on empathy, start to learn about what other people are experiencing, and find a way to see things from other people's perspectives. That's the only way that we can really address that problem of inequality. And our Walk a Mile this year, our theme is empathy, because of course, one of the ways that people talk about empathy is by saying walk a mile in their shoes. And it's a great visual of what we mean when we say empathy is, taking yourself out of your own situation, of your own bubble, putting yourself in someone else's shoes to try to see where they're coming from and see what they're experiencing. The more that we can do that, the more we are addressing the inequalities in our society. And that way, we're lowering that, we're lowering the rate of violence because people are understanding each other a little bit more. And even understanding isn't even the right word, because you don't really have to understand exactly how somebody feels. You just have to know that their feelings are valid and their experiences are valid, even if they're not the same as yours. So one of the best ways to prevent violence is to practice empathy. It's to help teach kids and teenagers and other adults to express feelings in a way that's healthy for everybody around them. And it's really just, getting out there and trying to help other people understand the things that you're learning. Other methods that are really important for prevention are some of the other things that are a little bit uncomfortable, like speaking up if somebody is talking about, let's say, telling a rape joke and, nobody's really addressing it. If you have an opportunity to say, hey, that's not funny, or why do you think that's funny? It's really important to speak up when given the opportunity. That's the same in any situation that you can think of. If you're a bystander and you see something unacceptable happening, if it's safe for you to speak up and put a stop to it, then that's another really important form of prevention. Julie, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, being self-reflective too. Like, no one's immune from, having certain biases or stereotypes. So being able to self-reflect on how did things impact me as I was growing up, as I was kind of learning how the world works, or watching my favorite TV shows, or, whatever it may be. And like Cassie said, if it's safe, if someone's making a rape joke, or if someone is making, some kind of objectifying, comment about someone who's walking down the street, having that courage, especially if it's a friend, to be able to be like, yo, that's not cool. Like, that made me really uncomfortable. That's not okay to say.
Yeah, definitely. And at Blackburn Center too, we specifically, call on men to step up in those types of situations. Where, again, I hope that I'm very clear that this type of violence can happen to anybody, regardless of their gender. However, the statistics do tell us that men perpetrate violence against women the most often. And so it's important for men to speak up and call out other men if they see behaviors that are harmful in any way, even if it seems like something really small, like catcalling, can be very, very harmful and is a form of verbal abuse. And it's important for, somebody else who might be with the person who's doing the catcalling to say, no, cut it out. Like, nobody wants that. And so just small things like that are really important for prevention. Just being aware of what other people are experiencing, what they're dealing with, being aware of your own language and how you speak to others or speak about others, and really being aware of the rape culture that we live in and making an effort to be different from that, to not blame victims when an assault happens or when violence happens, and instead trying to understand why somebody who perpetrates violence does what they do and holding them accountable for those actions in order to change it in the future.
Well, thank you. I think that's great that you're starting out with teaching young kids.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. That's before I came to Blackburn Center, that wasn't something that I had really considered too much either. But we see such amazing responses from kids and see them learning and really soaking in that information. And it gives me a lot of hope for that upcoming generation to hopefully be better and to be practicing empathy from a much earlier age.
Well, first, I can't believe that we've been talking for half an hour or so. It went by so fast, and I've learned so much that I've been tempted to take notes the entire time. I feel like you may be a professor at some point, Cassie.
Well, thank you.
So I really appreciate you too, Julie. So I definitely really appreciate, and we're going to turn it over to questions. But one of the things I want to emphasize to everybody today is that this isn't the end of a conversation. This is in fact just the start of a conversation. And I know that whenever I hear you folks speak, that it appeals to the better angels of our nature. And that each of us, whenever we hear about these things, the first kind of question that comes to your mind is, maybe I observed something, or maybe I should be more observant, or what can I do to try to help? So please know that this is just the start of a conversation for anyone. And I keep saying this, I'm going to say it until people do it. Please tell 5 people to tell 5 people about that number for the hotline. We can help so many people, and it literally takes you 10 seconds to do. Even if you wanted to text some friends and go through your contacts and say, here's a really valuable resource that we have in our community that can be extremely helpful. So we have some people here, and I know that people can ask questions by putting their hand up, which is very strange in a digital format, and I can call on them, or you can say something in the chat. So I'll leave that open. And I think that if maybe you feel a little bit timid right now with regard to asking a question, to know that for certain, that for 24 hours every day, that there's someone on the other line. And that's just such an important thing. So I see that Julie put that out. And then again, Julie, well, I need to have you as a co-moderator for every one of these, if that's possible, because she's been doing a great job this whole time.
And she was on the spot too. I pulled her into this morning, so she's on it.
She's clearly a natural.
Yes.
Right before I say it, it appears in the chat. So that's really good. Let's see. And then Cassie, the same thing. I was just going to say the same thing. So
following her lead.
You folks are pros. And again, I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that your work is inspirational. And the fact that you give voice to the voiceless every single day. And I know that you also have personal lives. And I know that this isn't the type of job that you drive home without having it in your mind. So you've really dedicated yourselves doing something that is so good. I mentioned earlier when I used the term angels to describe you, I truly mean that. You are the people that are helping give voice to the voiceless, as I mentioned. So I don't see anything in the chat right now, but I just want to say thank you to everyone that's going to watch this. Thank you for everyone that attended. Thank you to the students, and most importantly, thank you to the representatives of the Blackburn Center. On behalf of Westmoreland County Community College, I'm Dr. Kevin Kappa, and I want to thank you for attending today's session.